If you remember, about this time last year, I had the opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with Julie Behling. At that time, Julie had just wrote and released the book Beneath Sheep's Clothing, which uncovered various tactics that the far left uses to indoctrinate our children in public education. Well, she joins me again on the podcast to talk about the documentary that was made from the book. We talk about the new things that she learned about the far left's plot, the heavy hitters she worked with from the freedom movement, and where and how to support the film. I can't encourage you enough to go out and get a ticket to this and take your teenagers with you, because it's going to be super important that they know what it is that's happening right now in their educational system. That's next on this episode of the Mormon Renegade Podcast. Look, it's no secret that our society has become much more crude and coarse. To become and raise men and women of virtue and character is a Herculean task. To help with this, I have recently wrote and published a book. Now, back in the 1700s, Washington had a book called Rules of Civility and Decent Behavior in Company and Conversation. It was a book with 110 rules that talked about how to conduct yourself like a civilized person in society, something that today's society is sorely lacking. What I did is I went back through the book and I reinterpreted his original sayings for the 21st century. So the book is laid out in a way in which you see Washington's original rule. Right below that is my explanation for the 21st century, and below that you'll find 2 or 3 examples of where to use this in the real world. Now, to go along with this, there's a workbook that helps parents teach these principles and practices to their kids. To find the book, go to MormonRenegade.com, go to the bottom of the page, search out the blog post, and order your copy today. I can bear personal testimony from personal experience that this is an invaluable tool to help you raise men and women of virtue and character. Well, Julie, I've been watching on Facebook a little bit. You've been busy. You've been hanging out with some cool people too. James Lindsay, just off the top of my head. That's been awesome. Your book has kind of caught fire a little bit, hasn't it?
Well, and the documentary is gonna be even more potent, I think, coming out here in just a couple weeks.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's kind of crazy. I mean, this whole process from the book to where things are now began well over 20 years ago. So it's just definitely not me. I mean, I feel like a baton was handed to me and I just chose to run with it, but there's way more forces at work here than me.
Yeah, no, I can identify with that. Every time I log on and fire up this microphone, I think you could have so found a better guy for this than me, Lord, but whatever. So let me ask you this. Did you always know that this was gonna, first off, let's start here. When is the movie going to be released? You said a couple of weeks. Is there a hard release date on this?
Yeah, so we have 3 live premieres scheduled and a 4th one in the works. The first live premiere will be in Phoenix, Arizona on January 11th, then St. George, Utah, January 12th, and Lehi, Utah, January 13th. The online premiere is scheduled for January 19th. And we are working on cross fingers that we can have actually a South Florida premiere also on January 19th. So we're balls are moving, and I mean we had Glenn Beck repost the trailer for the documentary. We've had other people. I had someone who yesterday told me, someone who texts with Tucker Carlson, who said that she would share the trailer with Tucker Carlson. And anyways, things are moving and it's amazing to see. It's kind of daunting, but yeah, I mean, it all started from my master's thesis after my mission to Russia with, again, researching underground Christian movements in the Soviet Union. And people have asked me, did you ever think that when you were writing your thesis, it could lead to something like this? And I actually will say yes. I actually felt from the very beginning that the purpose of me researching Christianity in the Soviet Union and their survival tactics and and Soviet tactics to destroy Christianity, yes, I actually did think that there was some purpose for that that would translate to helping America's Christians at some time in the future.
Wow.
So,
That's got to be but even though you thought that this could happen, it still has to be a weird, kind of a surreal moment to watch it go from your thesis paper to a book and now to a movie. What was
mhm.
the process like to really crank this up into a movie? Was it hard to get that going?
I mean, it was hard, but it was also not it was not even my intention ever for the documentary. So the way that came about, so again, I wrote my thesis between 2002 and 2004, after having been a missionary in Russia in the late 90s. And then the book, it was in 2008 where I started research for my book. I wrote most of my book between 2009, 2011, set it aside because I had a mental block and couldn't finish it. And I don't think it was the right time for the book to come out. And then finished the book at the end of 2021, early 2022. And then, so that had been a 20-year process at that point. So I went to publish my book on Amazon. I self-published it and I was clicking the button. I was like, man, I'm going to sleep so well tonight. This is 20 years worth of efforts that I'm finally, this is the culmination. I'm super excited. Here we go. I'm going to sleep so well. I clicked the button to publish the book, and then I did not sleep well that night. I was up till 4 in the morning and I was seeing in my mind's eye imagery from my book, but in like a cinematic format.
Mm.
And it felt like I was being shown that was the next step. And so it was a little bit much for me. And I was like, I just said a prayer. I was like, okay, Heavenly Father, if this is what you want, then you'll have to send me someone who can work with video like that because I don't have the skill for that, for what I was seeing. And then I was contacted I mean, it was less than a month later by a documentary filmmaker. And he said that he saw my book. He's a documentary filmmaker. It looks like my book should be made into a documentary. Was I open to talking with him? And it was actually someone who was a Facebook friend of mine who I'd never met. I don't even know how we became Facebook friends. But we met up another month or two later. And this was in 2022, summer of 2022 at this point. And it was like, yeah, we're on the same page here. We're going to move forward with this. And I was like, well, there's one problem. I have no money. I can't pay you anything. And he said, well, we'll just take the steps in the direction and the money will come. He's like, that's been my experience. So then it was a whole year later that we got funding. But during that year, we were both, I was putting a significant amount of effort into the documentary with no funding. And he was also, we did recorded some interviews, and he put together a trailer, and we had things that we interviewed James Lindsay without funding, and brought him to St. George and figured it out somehow. But really and truly, there were so many areas of divine intervention I can't even tell you. So
That is absolutely awesome. I know that feeling of feeling like, okay, I'm done, right? And then God's like, that's cute. Look at you. And I got something else for you to do, right? So I get that. Just as you're getting images of this, are you feeling overwhelmed at all that, hey, now we're going to turn this into a documentary?
well, what was overwhelming was I mean, the day of filming. So what I saw in my mind's eye was the reenactment footage that we ended up filming at the end of October, middle of October. And it was a scenes of indoctrination in a Soviet classroom, and then indoctrination scenes in a modern American woke classroom in which the teacher and the students are wearing these woke goggles, as I call them. And I call them woke goggles, I think, in my book. But I, anyways, it was wild to, I ordered vintage Soviet school uniforms from the former Soviet Union. Um, and young pioneer red neckerchiefs and linen pins, like all like vintage. And that was wild, the months. And then we did auditions for actors, and the two main actors that we needed were like way better than I was even hoping. And then the filming, the day of filming, again, this is filming scenes of indoctrination. It's at 6 in the morning. I'm driving to our filming location in Sanpete County, Utah, actually. And what song pops on the radio at 6 in the morning but Pink Floyd's
Another brick
that
in the wall.
yes.
Yep.
So
That's
that was my soundtrack driving to filming, and filming was wild. And then seeing the footage in the trailer for the first time, it brought me to tears. And then I'm actually have not seen the film yet. I'm actually going to be seeing it today for the first time. I haven't the first full cut. I mean, I've seen all the interview footage and I gave all the content to my filmmaker, but he takes everything I give him and makes it way better. So I'm super excited to see this first cut, and then we're going to make some changes and some cuts because it's too long, I think, right now. But I can't wait. There's certain scenes that I can't wait to see. But I really feel, I don't know, I feel people are like, oh, how you're not qualified to be a writer and a director for a film. I'm like, well, I have a filmmaker who does the film part. And for me, like it wasn't hard. I felt like everything was inspired, like to know how to put the film together. It was easy.
That is one of the most insidious things I think people and the adversary come at you with is you're not qualified. As
Mhm.
I've talked with parents about homeschooling, which we do with our kids, and I was the guy least likely to homeschool his kids, right? The part of our kids went all the way through public school, and then I saw it get real nasty, and I was like, well, I guess I'm going to be the weird parent now, and we're going to jerk our kids. But all the way through, like when we pulled our kids out of school, it was you're not qualified, right? And sometimes I think people and want to keep you in this box, right? Like you're stepping outside of where you're supposed to be. This is your box. You got to stay in this box. In the meantime, God's got other plans. And I think sometimes we can allow ourselves to become overwhelmed with that message of you're not qualified to do these things. And I think it's a beautiful testimony what you're doing here of breaking that box of saying, no, this is my calling. God gave this to me. For whatever reason, I'm qualified. And if I'm not qualified in something, he'll give me the resources I need to make it qualified. So I think
Yeah,
that's a beautiful testimony to that.
yeah. I mean, I'll just share one more kind of really interesting thing about how we got funded. That was a whole thing. I mean, we were at the end of the rope, like, man, if we don't get funding now, then this project is dead in the water. Then that was just, this summer of this year. And we'd already done six of the six main interviews and for the film, but we had to have funding to continue. So the person who ended up funding the documentary is a private individual, lives on the other side of the country, huge James Lindsay fan. And the people putting on the fundraiser for me, he was friends with them, and they were out on the East Coast visiting, and they were talking with him, and he was just like, man, have you ever heard of this guy, James Lindsay? And they're like, actually, yeah, we're bringing him to Utah like in 2 weeks to speak to be on our podcast. Do you want? And he was coming to also speak at my fundraiser. And they're like, do you want to come out? So this guy came out all the way from the East Coast. And then we had a VIP dinner for before the main fundraiser. And he was there, and he came up to us after. He's like, I think I want to fund your whole project. Like, what does this involve? And then the guy's name, he's our executive producer now. His name is Christian Palacios. He's actually his family immigrated from Latin America when he was a baby. His name means Christian palaces in Spanish.
Wow.
What did the Soviets destroy? They demolished the
Mhm.
Christian palaces. They demolished the churches. And now someone named Christian Palaces is funding a film that helps destroy communism and exposes the plot against Christianity. Anyways, I got the
Wow.
chills with that when I first realized that.
That's crazy. So
Yeah.
through the process of getting the movie ready to go, did you discover anything new that wasn't in your book?
Oh yeah.
If,
Yeah.
if it's not spilling the beans too much, can you fill us in on a little bit of that?
Yeah, so my book has things that we don't have time to go into in depth in the documentary, and vice versa, because I mean, I interviewed all these amazing people that are bringing groundbreaking information out. And so between James Lindsay, Lisa Logan, and Alex Newman, they were all discussing the one world religion that the UN is establishing, this one world religion of diversity, equity, inclusion, and sustainability. And so that was not anything in my book. I had not researched that. I mean, maybe I had seen a little bit about it. Also, the theme of it's not really a theme, but the issue with Christian nationalism as a trap to entrap Christians. That's also going to be in the documentary, and more whole
Can,
child education.
can you explain what you mean by using Christian nationalism as a trap Christians? What does that mean?
Mhm. Yeah, so I'm not going to spill the full beans on this one, but I actually interviewed James Lindsay a second time last week just on this topic when we were at America Fest in Phoenix, because this is something that he can see brewing, and he's kind of got a brain bigger than most of us,
Hmm.
and he's been delving in all, and he understands how all this works, and he won't even go into all the details. Basically, this whole Christian nationalism thing, it's a trap, because what does it even mean? It means everything from you and me, like people who are Christians and who love America, to there's like two people who are actually want an authoritarian Christian America, where the
Hmm.
government is an authoritarian Christian, where like by law you must be Christian, you
Mandating
must.
religion. Yeah.
Yes. So there's like two people who want that, but actually these guys are like ringleaders and have huge followings. And so by having this tiny group of people, and they might not even be organic, they might be operatives. In fact, there's evidence that they're operatives to lead Christians further in the authoritarian direction. And then they might catch a few, but not catch all. And then maybe there's something that comes up and there's some scuffle, that just kind of like January 6th. There were
Hmm.
people who infiltrated that were bad actors that cast a dark shadow on all of the Trump supporters as, um, dangerous and whatnot, even though that was definitely not the case. There could be a similar type situation where then all Christians and all Christians who love America could be cast into,
I see.
when some kind of event takes place. And there's evidence that that is brewing.
Yeah,
So,
okay. No, that makes sense. And I mean, look, as a Mormon, I mean, I'm not sure there's another Christian religion out there that says that the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution are darn near scripture, right?
right.
And so it would be real easy. Now, having said that, I'm not in favor of having my religion mandated by the government. I don't want the things I believe being mandated
Yeah.
from behind the Oval Office, right? I want freedom of religion. I want people to be able to choose your religion, lack of religion, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I find it very disturbing because those things, here's what they don't understand when they play these games, right? Is that okay, right now your guy is saying what you want, but what happens when it's not your guy?
Right.
And there's only one thing Barack Obama ever said about the Constitution I agree with, and he said that the Constitution was a charter of negative liberties against government. You're 100% correct. That's exactly what it's designed to do. And so, yeah, to fall into that trap, and it's so seductive to a lot of folks because they're like, finally, a guy saying the things that I believe in, but they don't. So it's really hard to take a step back, take emotion out of it, and look at it and just say, is this a good thing? So that's fascinating
Right.
stuff.
Well, there was an event that took place a couple of weeks ago. There was this that satanic altar put up at that courthouse. Was it in Iowa? And then a guy came and beheaded, a Christian guy came and beheaded and destroyed and smashed that altar. And I mean, that's a kind of I mean, no one was injured. And I personally am not a fan of Satanism and don't want satanic altars up at, county courthouses or whatever, that the state capitol or whatever it was. But the Christian nationalists, the few ones that like really call themselves Christian nationalists and they want that authoritarianism. They're like, oh yes, we're gonna smash all the altars. They're going back into like an Old Testament framework that they're trying to capture. This is what it looks like to me. So interacting with these people on Twitter, X, and they're wanting to capture. So because there's been so much silence against evil on the part of the
Mhm.
church in general. And so someone is, oh, finally someone is standing up, but now this person is pushing towards this authoritarian thing. And we just have to be careful that, we support the Constitution because that is the framework, that is the answer. Um, just like you said, freedom of religion, or people can choose not to have a religion. We don't want in America a government that dictates religion to us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What was it like working with some of those bigger names like James Lindsay?
Well, James is awesome, and Trevor Loudon. I mean, I really, really appreciate them. Very down to earth, very humble, and very genuine. Um, James is, of course, a genius. I mean, Trevor is too. Like, and they come at, exposing communism from completely different angles. Alex Newman, wow, the interview we did with him was just power packed. I mean, every single interview that I did, whether it was with a big name like James Lindsay or an unknown person who is an activist on the ground exposing critical race theory in the school, like my friend Carrie Bartholomew. I mean, every interview, there's just so much. I mean, it's really hard to cut this film. I mean, we could have made a docuseries with the amount of content that we have, uh, really high quality content, but I'd say everyone that I interviewed, it was just a great pleasure. And we're going to have James Lindsay and Trevor Loudon at all of our premieres here in Phoenix, St. George, and Lehigh. And for people to be able to take pictures with them. And then also we have VIP tickets where people can hang out with them after the film and hang out with, I mean, I'm not a big name, but myself and my filmmaker Steve will be there and different other people in the film. But yeah, James and Trevor are the real deal, real patriots, real freedom lovers, and extremely knowledgeable about the communist agendas.
You know, I just did another podcast. I haven't released it yet. It'll probably come out right after yours. But we talked with a woman named Chelsea who's big on
I know
keeping.
Chelsea.
Okay, yeah.
Chelsea is awesome. She
She
is
is, she is
awesome.
awesome. I just talked with her just a few days ago. And um one of the things that really struck me was how important it seems to the left seems to have, and when I'm talking the left, I'm not talking about, a Kennedy type Democrat, right? I'm talking about the
Far left.
far left, right? But those are the ones really driving the narrative right now. So
Yep.
I'm going to use that. But they seem to have two states that they are really targeting hard right now. One is Texas, and the other is Utah. And I feel like I have a buddy who lives down in Texas. He's like, things are weird. Something's happening. And you can see it in Utah. And as I looked
Absolutely.
at this, and I kind of looked at this from a 3,000 foot view, if you will, what I began to understand is both Utah and Texas are somewhat anomalies within the Union. Texas has a very strong Texas culture, which is founded in, Republican style democracy, right?
Right.
People forget that Texas was 5 states before it joined the Union. I mean, and they actually have a trigger law where they can essentially go back to that if they so need. I mean, they're serious about it.
I was born in Texas and I went to elementary school in Texas, so I am very aware
You're
of
very familiar, right?
Texas culture. Yes.
When we moved from North Dakota, we there were 2 job offers I had that I was considering seriously. One was in Utah and the other was in San Antonio. And we obviously chose Utah to be closer to family and stuff. But um Utah's unique in the sense, again, because of Mormon beliefs, right? It's in the scriptures itself in DNC that it says, these founding documents are God inspired, right? And there's been a long history of patriotism within Utah. I feel like the left says, okay, if we can take down these 2 states, we can take down anything else. And so it's been hard to get people to wake up and understand, look, this is not good stuff, because they frame it as we're on the cutting edge of things. We're doing amazing things. This 15-minute city out by Lehigh. I mean, but it's not good stuff, right?
No.
Because the forces involved are seeking to subvert liberty and freedom. And it's something we have to be on guard for.
Right. And Utahns we're trusting because
Mhm.
most of us are good people, and we're not sitting around plotting about how to harm and subjugate other people. So we don't assume that everyone is out to get us. And then there's kind of like a bit of a follower mentality. And then if someone has an R next to their name and they're a
Mhm.
card-carrying member of the church, that and someone says they were nice, sure, let's
Yeah.
get them all into politics here.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I heard, I saw another interview with James Lindsay while he was in Utah, and I can't remember who it was with. It's driving me nuts. But he basically said, you guys are not far away from going the way of California, essentially.
yeah,
Uh,
well, he that was my fundraiser event where he
was it?
spoke. I mean, yeah, that he spoke last summer, and that was the topic was the threats to that against Utah.
What did you find out about the threats to Utah? I'm guessing that the documentary is not to Utah specific.
No, no, we don't go into Utah specifically at all in the documentary. It's the threats to Christianity and to our children. But I mean, Chelsea is really the expert on threats to Utah. But I mean, our media is very deeply subverted. Church is not speaking out for whatever reason, and people can come to their own conclusions on that. Um, we have all these rhinos. They're honestly like I'm not the expert. I've been following the We Are the People podcast again, and Chelsea does a lot of interviews with them, exposing things as do other people. They are under heavy attack right now for all that they're exposing. Very dark underbelly of things in Utah. Again, because it's anything the truer people believe their church is, the more they believe that they are a Zion community or are supposed to become that, the greater that would be a target for the dark forces to infiltrate. And even Jesus is one of his own apostles was a son of perdition. So, and Jesus gave multiple warnings about wolves in sheep's clothing. So, we can see that, within the government here in Utah and otherwise. And honestly, everywhere where there's good, there's going to be evil seeking to infiltrate.
Absolutely. Have you gotten much pushback since the book and the movie went into production?
Yeah, I mean, I had a thinly veiled death threat after I was on the Kate Daly show in 2022. And I had someone pose, I don't do reflexology anymore, but I was still doing reflexology. I had someone pose as a reflexology client, and it was clear that they were trying to set me up and get me to say things, and that's a whole other topic. After my fundraiser and after I posted on social media a picture with myself and all of the people at my fundraiser, including Jason and Alexia Preston with We Are the People podcast here in Utah, and James Lindsay and Trevor Loudon. I posted a picture saying we're going to give communism a black eye. And then I go out on a walk in the evening, and I had a truck rush, rev up its engine toward me and they threw a lit firecracker at me and then drove off. And it was two adult males in the truck. They weren't teenagers. Um, yeah, I have security cameras now. I've had other things happen. And then some people might think this is crazy, but probably not you. I'm very sensitive spiritually, and I've been under their spiritual attack. And so I have
Sure.
to do various things in that regard as well. So I'm sure there's much more to come, unfortunately, but oh well.
Wow.
So,
That's amazing. You know, I've experienced a little bit of that myself. And that's not a fun place to be. Um, it takes a little bit of grit and a lot of tenacity to be able to withstand some of that. So good for you for being able to do that. As you were working through the process of getting this documentary up and running, what was the hardest challenge, you think? Was it the funding? Was it something else?
Yeah, it was not being able to pay my bills because I felt that I had to do this project and also juggling that with homeschooling my son. Um, but I was really, really blessed, and I am really blessed that I have some really close friends and also my dad who believed in me and were very supportive. And without that support, it would have been impossible. And then the fact that Steve, my filmmaker, were totally on board, he and his wife totally on board with the content, um, even in spite of the fact, when I first met them, I was like, look, there's some controversial stuff here. Like, are you guys sure you want to? And they're like, yep, we're in for it. I'm like, okay, all right. But yeah, it was the financial lack at times, and of course some people saying, oh, that's not going to work, you just go get a job. I'm like, well, this is what I'm supposed to do, so I'm going to do it until it's not possible to, as long as it's possible for me to keep working on it, I will. And I just had resources show up. I'm grateful to there were people who donated. There were many people who donated small amounts and larger amounts all last spring and summer, and because of them, the film was able to move forward. And I'm very grateful. Some people are like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I only could donate $20." I'm like, "You have no idea. Every dollar of that was so helpful." Um, but yeah, so it's a huge hurdle when you're making a film. The cost of it, the cost to bring to people to interview, the cost of everything.
What kept you going spiritually through this process, right? Because there's times I can only imagine what it would be like to be in the production phase of a film, right? I understand the writing the book part. That's a grind, right? It
It was
absolutely is a
total
grind.
grind. Yeah.
But filmmaking isn't something I've even ever thought about or considered. What kept you going spiritually as those forces start grinding on you?
Well, honestly, the book for me was much harder to write than the script for the film, because what I did for the script of the film is I had the transcripts of all these amazing interviews with these highly knowledgeable people. And there were so many great nuggets to string together using my book as a guide, as a format, and then just, my narrations to kind of fill in any holes. That was easy. And then the actual part, like on the computer, like editing, I'm not doing that work. That's Steve's job. I know it's been overwhelming for him. He's says that he's super excited to share with me the cut that he's going to share with me today, and it moves him to tears to watch it, he said. But really and truly, for me, the hardest part was the book.
Can't get enough of the Mormon Renegade podcast? Well, good news. We're on Patreon, and there's 3 packages that you can choose from. The first one, the Slightly Rowdy package, allows you to hear the podcast without all those pesky commercials getting in the way. For those who want a slightly more in-depth experience, there's the Stirring It Up package, where you can hear ad-free audio, ad-free video, and transcripts. Finally, for those who want to go full Renegade, that package is available too, where you can get everything in the previous 2 packages, plus an extra show where myself and Ben Winfield break down the news of the day from a very Mormon point of view. You will also get exclusive access to Renegade Chat, and on there you'll be able to talk to others about the show or whatever topics are on your mind. Go to Patreon today and get your exclusive content.
But really and truly, for me, the hardest part was the book.
Gotcha.
That it was, yeah. And that was also, I wrote most of it at a time when it was not, it was very, very, very fringe to consider communism overtaking America in any way. And I had very few people who believed in me. I had a few friends who believed in me, but it was not something that most people believed in at that time.
Right.
Now that feels like my documentary was God is bringing it forth at just the right time where it can have the maximal impact. And so it's exciting.
Nice. You talked about your son there just a minute, and no ages, no names, nothing like that. But he must have, what a cool experience for him, because I'm guessing he's probably kind of glued to your hip. throughout this process, right?
I mean, he has been on trips with me. He's young. He's third grade. Yeah, I mean, he's been on some interview trips with me, and the content is too mature
Hmm.
for him. It's not for children. We're exposed to what communism really is in this film, and including the horrors of the Gulag that have not been really exposed to Americans properly. But I mean, I don't know. I guess when he's older, I'll ask him what it's been like for him, but he hasn't known anything else. And he has different friends that he goes and plays at their house, so I can get work done. So he's not with me 24/7, but
Cool. Cool. I was just thinking, my kids helped me with the podcast, my two 17-year-olds. And it's been fun to work with them on things. And even though your son's a little younger, I dare to say he probably remembers
yeah,
some of what happened here. And
yeah.
someday he'll see his mom on TV, or or something, and that'll be something he can look back on.
Well, he got to be on TV, was it a week and a half ago? I was doing actually a TV interview, and he got into a fight in the next room with his friend, and it was very loud. So he got to be on TV with that. Won't make that mistake again. Won't have friends over playing with him when I'm doing interviews. But
Ah, that's awesome. I'll say this about, being a grandfather now. Um, when your kids do something, it's cute to everybody else but you. So I wouldn't sweat that too terribly much. What was your biggest fear in going forward with the film?
I've kind of had the fear beaten out of me because I've had some pretty major losses in my life. And so when you've already lost almost everything, you don't really have that much fear of loss
Oh,
because you've already lost everything and survived. So I don't know. That's my best answer. I've
no, I
already
think I
already
think
lost
that
everything. So
I think that's brilliant. Sometimes, like when people encounter hardships, they really have two options, right? You can let that hardship beat you down and define who you're going to be. Or you can just keep plugging away at whatever it is you're doing. And at some point, those failures become strengths, right? It's like building up calloused hands. You're
yeah.
like, well, if I've said before, and I've lost one job over the podcast already. But I've always said, as long as I got my family, I can restart this thing anytime I need, right? If I go down to zero. But I think that only comes through a wisdom that's only granted through hardship.
Yeah, I this is actually one thing I really want to share since you're taking this interview on like kind of my journey with the documentary. I really feel that one of the things that I want to share with people is like I can look over my lifetime and I can see going back many decades, all the preparation for me to be at the point where I'm at, where this documentary is coming out and hopefully making a significant impact for good. And there were many losses and many lessons. Every skill that I've gained with my entrepreneurial activities, almost all of those skills are translating into helping me succeed with this. My website background, my, dealing with emails and contact managers. And I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Every skill, almost every skill that I've developed is translating, and also my ability to deal with controversial content. I had a previous blog and book and online video blog years ago that was controversial and that got pretty big. And then I had, some kind of big things happen with that. And so even being able to deal with haters and trolls. I've dealt with so many haters and trolls over the years and dealing with narcissists, honestly, in my personal life. The Marxist operatives out there on the internet, they use the same tactics as narcissists. They use narcissistic abuse tactics to shame and silence people. And I've had enough experience. My martial arts experience, I trained in a martial art for three and a half years. And my sparring experience with martial arts translates into dealing with these trolls online as well.
Mm.
It's crazy how all the many things have come together. And again, I see a lot of the people who are doing a lot of exposing things right now and risking things. They're people who, I mean, they're being willing to sacrifice, or they're people who already don't have much to lose. They've already lost everything. But I'm hoping that more and more people can realize that there's something for them to do. You know, there's something for each of us here to do that we're being prepared for. And I want to encourage people to tune in to understand what that is and to have faith that they'll be able to do whatever it is they're called to do. Because that's what we need. We need millions and millions of people. I feel like I'm called to change the world, and I feel like you're called to change the world too, whatever our sphere of this world is. And that's what it takes that's what it's going to take for us to reinstitute freedom and at the helm of our nation. It's going to take millions of people who are doing some risky things that they're personally called to do. So please, I hope that people will do that.
That is so beautifully said. And that's something I have felt for quite a while. As far as our liberty and our country go again, we need to have another moment individually between us and God and maybe those that we associate with and we surround ourselves with, where we maybe have to say the words again like the founders did, our lives, fortunes, and sacred honor on the line. And that's really the way out of this. I was a guy forever who looked for another founder, so to speak, right? Someone who had those qualities. And I would get excited about a guy, and then it would go in flames, right? He'd get co-opted somehow or whatever. And what I realized is that we got to stop looking for the one guy. He's just not out there. But there's a lot of us. And if we can just take the time to get heard, I think that's huge. And when I see someone like yourself who writes a book over a 20-year period, just tenacity, just tenacious, not going to give up on it, and then to have that be able to roll into a documentary, that's huge, inspiring stuff. And I think you're right there. And I've said this before, if you're listening to this podcast, it's not an accident, right? I mean, you bumped into a Mormon fundamentalist podcast. I mean, you're not here by accident. And I've said there's something for people to do. You just have to find out what it is. I mean, that's the hardest part. It's just find out what it is and then go at it with reckless abandon. Um,
Yeah.
what were you going to say? Sorry.
No, no, no. No, go ahead.
Um, so we've covered kind of your what some of your fears were about doing this. Now let's roll into this. What are you hoping happens with the movie?
That's a very good question. I mean, it will depend on, I mean, it is depending on many other people who I've interacted with, who I've met, who are, saying, please let me know how I can help you promote this film. I mean, my ultimate goal is that this film will be used as a tool to help nullify the agendas against Christians in America. Nullify meaning making those agendas so they cannot come to fruition. If enough people understand the communist playbook to destroy Christianity, they can just say, no, we're not doing that. We're not falling for that. We're not going down that road. And at the same time, to nullify the communist agendas within the schools to capture our children. If enough people understand these agendas and say, no, we're not doing that, we'll do anything but that. That is my goal. I mean, I hope that enough people see this, that the things that I expose in the book and documentary become part of the mainstream understanding. That's a lot, but it's not my message. I just grabbed the baton and I decided to go ahead and run with it. So it's truth, and it's what the portion of truth that I feel called to expose, and it's absolutely crucial at this time. So I hope people, it's going to be available online on Rumble and also my website, beneathsheepsclothing.movie. People can get tickets now. Beneathsheepsclothing.movie to online to stream it will be $12. It's $150 to stream it for like a whole church or a whole large group. And then our premiere tickets are more expensive because we're bringing James Lindsay and Trevor Loudon, and people will be able to meet them and then get their remarks after the film. And that's really, I hope a lot of the activists here in Utah, who the freedom activists, will come to the live premiere. Um, and I hope people will watch it again, not for little kids, but I would say 14 and up. Really important to view.
I think that was exactly where I was going to go next is age appropriateness. You feel 14 is a good age on that?
I mean, I think if parents probably should watch it first. So think of like at what age you would be okay with your kids learning really ugly things about the Holocaust and seeing images.
Okay.
And that's the age.
Okay. Well, you're probably talking to the wrong guy for that because I was kind of, it obviously wasn't 6, but once my kids hit about 12, I'm like, okay,
12, yeah, some people 12 is
I
that
can,
age. Yeah.
yeah. At that point I thought you're ready for this. And I'm also a big believer in the reason our kids don't perform a lot of times is because we don't set any expectations. I mean, when we look back and see Washington being Fairfax County, Virginia's county surveyor and leading expeditions at 16. I don't think we've done our kids any favors by trying to shelter them from the world. I think all we've done is further cripple them.
I don't want kids to be traumatized. I will say, like, some of the gulag stuff is really intense. And then Steve's filmmaking skills are so good that it brings a lot of emotion behind it. And so people just need to like know their children.
Yeah.
Um, my son is very sensitive. So he's 9, like I said. So, he's not going to see the film yet for sure. But yeah, if parents are like on the edge, they should see it first. But it's something that I do hope can help many. There's a lot of kids that are, being slowly indoctrinated, and many of them are not fully indoctrinated. I hope this film can be a way to bring them back to sanity.
Right. Absolutely. What made you decide to go with Phoenix as your launch city?
Yeah, so we had a booth last week and a week and a half ago now at America Fest from Turning Point USA. And also 2 people I interviewed in the film are in Phoenix.
Okay.
Robert Wallace, who's the chapter head of Gays Against Groomers for Arizona, and Seek Smith, who is the founder of Mom Army. And they are very well connected with patriot groups in Phoenix and Arizona. And then a lot of the people, there's a lot of people from other places, but we're like, well, we have Robert and Seek on the ground here, and Seek offered to help us um, organize that Phoenix premiere. And since we were promoting it very heavily at America Fest, they played our trailer from the main stage in addition to us having a booth. So we thought, and also Arizona is a really crucial state. So, and it's driving distance from Utah. So for those reasons. And then we'll also do one in South Florida. My executive producer is there. And then South Florida is a hotbed of conservative activism right now. And then we have someone who wants us to do one in Hollywood too. So maybe we will. I don't know.
Talk about
So
parachuting behind enemy lines. Holy cow.
yeah, yeah.
Florida, I've come to love Florida here lately with what they've done, but yeah, going to Hollywood that would be crazy. Have you gotten much interest from churches or liberty groups or something like that on showing the film?
Well, yeah, I was interviewed a few weeks ago by, oh, what's his name again? He leads up a group of pastors, the Black Robe Regiment pastors,
Hmm.
to try to infuse liberty back into the churches. And he has a group of 5,000 pastors that he works with. And he interviewed me, and he's going to bring me back to be part of his pastor's huddle a few times in the next year. And I think he wants to promote the film pretty heavily for those pastors. Um, yeah, but otherwise, in terms of churches, I mean, well, I met some people just at America Fest who are liberty-loving, anti-communist churches. So a lot of them connected with Turning Point USA Faith. So, but I mean, I hope all Christians will watch it, and I hope that people won't take offense. I mean, it's not pretty to look at the possibility of infiltration of one's church. It's people can get defensive. My goal, I will just say, my goal is not to tear down faith. My goal is to empower people, empower Christians to understand this playbook to destroy Christianity so they can root it out of their churches, not to destroy faith. I would like faith to increase, not decrease.
Yeah, really, as you look at the struggle against communism, right? However it's veiled, whether it's critical theory, whether it's, a soft maternal form of socialism, it all requires a degradation of religion. It cannot survive
Yeah.
in certainly a Judeo-Christian ethic. It doesn't work. The
Right.
two are like night and day,
Yes.
cold and hot.
Well, communism is the inversion of Christianity.
Yep.
So there's
Explain that
that.
real quick.
What's that?
Explain that. How is it the inversion of Christianity?
Well, I mean, communism, it makes all these promises. Oh, we're going to take care of the oppressed, and everyone's going to have bread, land, and peace, and equity, and all these things. And then what does it deliver? But torment, impoverishment, enslavement, and death.
Yeah.
That's what communism delivers. Christianity, now it's a harder road, but Christianity is also about helping the oppressed. Christ came to save each one of us who is oppressed by our sins and from whatever other situations we might be oppressed by. Um, Christianity is about this individual relationship with God. It's an individual thing.
Mm-hmm.
We're saved individually. Communism is this collectivist thing. You're saved. They're seeking to set up this, communists all from the beginning. Their goal is to set up a communist, godless workers' paradise on earth, and where they are the gods on top,
Yeah.
and there can be no other god. Um, One of the ways that Marxism is spreading in America, it's by using the compassion, weaponizing the compassion of Americans, because again, it have all these nice phrases of, yeah, we're going to be anti-racist and we're going to lift up the oppressed people. But then the solutions they offer are all the exact opposite. Christianity and Judaism has a framework of principles of right and wrong. Communism, there is no right and wrong. If you're doing something in the name of helping the oppressed, it's right by definition, even if it's murder, even if it's genocide. If it's for the oppressed, go ahead and commit the genocide.
Right.
So it's very disturbing.
People will often forget that the Nazis were socialists before
Yeah.
they ever began liquidating people.
Mm.
Um, and Hitler and Jesus only had two things ever in common. They both said, come with me and I'll feed you." One ended up in the gas chambers and the other ended up, changing the world and gave the basis for the West that we have known up to this point.
Right.
Let me ask this one other question. I'm going to let you go. I know you're up against a hard break here, but um, through this whole process, as you look at the book that you wrote, the documentary you and others have made, where do you think America sits on that scale of being primed for a leftist revolution?
Well, the leftist revolution is almost completed. So we're not primed for it. It's almost completed. But the good news is that a mass awakening of freedom loving Americans and just normal, decent Americans can stop it from fully progressing. And we have this window of time right now. I mean, do we have less than a year? Possibly. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, if we have enough people understand what's really happening, And again, say we're not doing that. Okay, I'm not, you're indoctrinating the children in this school. I'm not doing that. Either stop, get all the Marxist stuff out of the schools, or we're taking our kids out. How
Mhm.
are we going to deal with taking our kids out? Don't know. We'll figure it out. Just like if the school had a radiation leak, are you going to keep sending your kids to school and like, oh, but they don't have cancer yet? Okay, but you're destroying their life. Like we have to take it that seriously. Um, yeah, I mean, if we have enough people again, and with the churches, calling out the communist agendas to overtake the churches, and it really has to be grassroots. Um, that is that is going to be crucial. We need to decentralize as much power as possible within education. I got this image in my head the other day. We need to take an axe and chop America's public education into 10,000 pieces and give it back to the local communities, like Little House on the Prairie days.
Mhm.
Except now we have technology that they didn't have back then. Um, and lots of people aren't going to like this, but I believe decentralization of power within churches is also crucial. And individuals need to be empowered to have their connection with God and to be directed and not to give their power to a single governing body or person. It's very dangerous. In fact, in my thesis, that was the main lesson I came away with is that the more that a church had decentralized leadership, the better that they succeeded under a tyrannical regime, communism. The churches that had more highly centralized leadership were quickly infiltrated and destroyed.
I couldn't agree with you more. Um, the idea, if you look at the founders, the idea was the government that was governing less was best, but also that the government should be the closest to the people it can be.
Yeah. Yeah. And then our federal government should do actually what it's supposed to do, such as securing the border
Right.
and get
Yep.
out of education. And of course, this global government with the UN, no, just get Senator Mike Lee is trying to get us out of the UN. He's probably not going to succeed, but we need to get people on that bandwagon. The government needs to be more decentralized.
I couldn't agree more. And I think the same goes for religion as well. Any, uh, this is a personal thing. I know I'll have some who disagree with me on this, and that's okay. You knew what the name of the podcast was before you started listening. But um, if there's anybody that steps between you and God to tell you they know best and that you just need to sit down, shut up, and get with the program, that should be a massive red flag.
Definitely.
I'm not saying that there's not a place for good clergy, right? I'm not saying that there's not a place for someone to be able to help shepherd a flock.
Right.
But if that shepherd says, sit down, shut up, I know what's best, I will make your decisions for you, that's a red flag.
Totally.
Um,
And I'll go further. I'll go further because in the Soviet Union, the Pentecostals, the underground Pentecostals, they were heavily persecuted, but they thrived. And they they thrived even under that situation of communist rule. And it's because they were told that each person was to go, they were told this, to go find out from God what their role was to build the kingdom of God and then just go do it.
mhm. Yep.
And can that lead to some chaos? Yes, but it also led to really a thriving church under tyranny. So there's
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And as long as you always have a remnant around, you can rebuild. You have, as long as those principles survive, you have a shot. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm a guy that says God will talk to you. If he talks to me, his most petulant, flawed child there could be, he'll listen to anybody. So just be humble enough to go ask, and he'll give you direction. You're not gonna like it probably, but he'll give you the direction you need. Um, yeah, I couldn't have said that more beautifully. Just decentralizing things, and don't be afraid to be your own authority. Get your authority from God and run with that. If that has to be filtered through another individual, um, you may want to reassess where you're at.
The
Um,
scriptures say, trust not in the arm of flesh repeatedly.
right.
I
Abs-
never saw anywhere where it says follow the prophet in the scriptures.
no, I can't think of. Not right off the top of my head. Yeah, not right off the top of my head. And and understand that I think someone could be a prophet without having a, authority over people, so to speak.
Well, we'll just go with Samuel the Lamanite. Who was he? He was some random dude that God told to do some crazy stuff.
And he wasn't popular. He didn't have a huge following, right? Especially with the Nephites. He had some folks that paid attention, but by and large, they were like, "Yeah, get him off the wall. Whatever you got to do." So no, totally, I couldn't agree with you more. Well, Julie, I'll tell you what, I am so excited for this movie to come out. I just want to go through these dates again so we get them right, and then the sites. You have January 11th is in Phoenix. That's the first premiere. The Utah premiere is January 12th in St. George.
That's
Uh,
the first Utah premiere.
the first
And
Utah premiere. What theater is that going to be in?
it's going to be at the Electric Theater.
Perfect. That's a great theater. I've been there a couple times. That's a great theater. And then the
Mhm.
13th is Lehigh.
Yeah, at the Thanksgiving Point Megaplex.
Thanksgiving Point Megaplex. Perfect. South Florida and Hollywood are still. I'm not
Well,
gonna.
Hollywood was just proposed to me a couple days ago, and so it wouldn't be a premiere, it would be a showing because it's not going to be out before it's online. South Florida, it looks like we're a go, but we've got to we've got to get on that. So hopefully for January 19th in South
Very cool.
Florida, Fort Lauderdale or Miami.
They can find the movie at Rumble.
It will be on Rumble, starting on the 19th. It also will be available and people can buy tickets now at beneathsheepsclothing.movie. We'll stream it from beneathsheepsclothing.movie as well. It'll actually be slightly cheaper on our website. Rumble will be slightly more expensive.
Perfect. And then yeah, Beneath Sheep's Clothing movie. Well, perfect. Anything you want to say we didn't cover, Julie?
No, thanks so much for having me on and letting me say what I really think. I appreciate it.
What I do. I appreciate you. I appreciate all the hard work you've put into this. This is for a guy who came into this late for you, right? At last year. It's about a year ago we talked last.
Mhm.
It's been awesome to watch things go as I've seen certain posts. You're a rock star. I can't tell you how thankful I am I bumped into you.
Well, just doing what I can. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Hang out for about 5 minutes. I got a few more questions off air for you.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.